Jake Rivers stood in the center of the white metal room with his hands locked behind his back. The chains around his wrists felt cold against his skin. 3 judges sat behind a tall desk looking down at him, like he was some kind of bug they wanted to step on. Admiral Kane sat in the middle chair, and Jake could not believe his old teacher was really doing this to him. The room was full of people, but nobody was on his side. Officers he had fought with sat in the back rows, shaking their heads at him. News reporters pointed their cameras at his face, waiting for him to break down and cry. The air felt thick and hard to breathe. Admiral Kane picked up a datapad and started reading in his deep voice that Jake remembered from training days. Back then, that same voice had taught him how to fly ships and fight enemies. Now it was reading out charges that could get him killed. Commander Jake Rivers, you are charged with disobeying direct orders during the Battle of Kepler Prime. You broke formation without permission and left the supply convoy without protection. Because of your actions, 3 Alliance ships were destroyed and 412 people died. How do you answer these charges? Jake looked straight at Admiral Kane and tried to keep his voice steady. Not guilty, sir. I detected a massive enemy ship preparing to attack our main fleet. I had to act fast, or we would have lost everything. Some people in the room laughed, but not in a nice way. Admiral Kane held up his hand for quiet and looked at Jake with sad eyes. Command of the battle records show no enemy dreadnought in that sector. Our best sensors found nothing. 3 ship captains died because they had to cover the convoy you abandoned. Captain Mills had 2 children. Captain Torres was getting married next month. Captain Blake had served the Alliance for 20 years. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. He knew those names and faces. Good people who trusted him and followed him into battle. But he also knew what he had seen on his sensors that day. A huge shadow moving behind the smaller enemy ships. Something big enough to destroy their entire fleet, if it got the chance to attack. Sir, I know how it looks, but something was wrong with our main sensors that day. My ship picked up readings the others missed. There was a cloaked dreadnought waiting behind the enemy formation. If I had not drawn them away, it would have destroyed our command ships. Admiral Kane shook his head slowly. Jake, we have been over this for weeks. Every piece of evidence says you made a mistake. A terrible mistake that cost lives. The other 2 judges agree with me. We find you guilty of all charges. The room went quiet except for the sound of cameras clicking and people whispering. Jake felt his heart beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He had expected this, but it still hit him like cold water. The sentence for your crime should be death, Admiral Kane continued. But the Council has decided on something else. You will be exiled to Tartarus 7. You will be dropped on that world with basic supplies and left there. No rescue missions will be authorized. No ships will patrol its space. You will live or die by your own choices. Jake had heard stories about Tartarus 7, a prison world where the worst criminals were sent to disappear. The planet itself was a killer with acid storms and creatures that hunted anything that moved. Nobody had ever come back from that place. Ever. You have 1 hour to prepare, Admiral Kane said. Guards will escort you to your transport. May whatever God you believe in have mercy on your soul. The guards came forward, and Jake did not fight them. What was the point now? As they led him toward the door, Admiral Kane called out his name. Jake turned around and saw his old teacher walking toward him. The guards let the Admiral get close. I am sorry it came to this, son, Admiral Kane said quietly so only Jake could hear. But the Alliance needs someone to blame for what happened at Kepler Prime. You made yourself an easy target when you broke formation. The people need to believe their leaders make the right choices even when people die. Jake stared at the man who had been like a father to him. So you know I was right about the cloaked ship? Admiral Kane looked around to make sure nobody was listening, then nodded once. The evidence was destroyed after the battle. Some secrets are too dangerous to let people know. Your exile serves a purpose, Jake. Sometimes good soldiers have to die for the greater good. The guards pulled Jake toward the door, but he kept looking back at Admiral Kane. The old man stood there watching him go with something that might have been regret in his eyes. Or maybe it was just the light playing tricks. The transport ship was small and dirty with cells for 20 prisoners. Jake was the only one wearing a military uniform. The others looked like the kind of people who probably deserved to be on Tartarus 7. Killers and thieves and worse things that made normal people have nightmares. As the ship lifted off from the station, Jake pressed his face against a small window and watched the stars grow brighter. Somewhere out there was a world that wanted him dead, a place where even the plants and animals were enemies. He was 28 years old, and this might be the last week of his life. But Jake Rivers had not given up yet. He had survived battles that killed better soldiers than him. He had learned to fight from the best teachers in the galaxy. If Tartarus 7 wanted to kill him, it would have to work for it. He was not going to die easy. The transport ship shook like a wild animal as it fell through the atmosphere of Tartarus 7. Jake pressed himself against the wall of his cell and listened to metal screaming under stress. Red warning lights flashed everywhere, and the other prisoners were yelling about dying in a crash instead of getting a chance to fight for their lives on the surface. Jake knew this was no accident. The pilot was probably following orders to make sure none of them survived the landing. Dead prisoners could not tell anyone what they found on this world. The Alliance wanted their secrets to stay buried here forever. A huge explosion somewhere in front of the ship threw everyone against the bars. Jake tasted blood in his mouth and felt something warm running down his face. The floor tilted at a crazy angle, and he could see fire through the small windows. They were going down fast and hard. The impact came like a giant fist hitting the ship. Jake felt himself flying through the air before everything went black. When he woke up hours later, the transport was a broken pile of metal scattered across a valley floor. Bodies were everywhere and none of them were moving. Jake was the only one still breathing. His left arm hurt like fire, and he could feel broken ribs grinding when he tried to sit up. The emergency kit was still strapped to his belt, which meant he had basic medical supplies and 3 days of food bars. Not much to keep a man alive on a world that wanted to kill him. Jake crawled out of the wreckage and got his first real look at Tartarus 7. The sky was the color of old blood with 2 small suns burning through thick clouds. Black mountains rose up all around him like broken teeth. The air smelled like metal and something rotten that made his stomach turn. Everything here wanted him dead. The grass had sharp edges that cut through his boots when he walked on it. Strange purple flowers shot tiny darts at anything that moved too close. Even the rocks seemed to shift position when he was not looking directly at them. Jake found a cave in the mountainside and dragged some metal sheets from the wreck to make a shelter. The first night was the longest of his life. Things howled in the darkness outside his cave. Big things with voices that sounded almost human, but not quite right. He held his energy pistol and counted his shots. 12 charges left and no way to reload it. On the second day, Jake found water in a stream that ran down from the mountains. It tasted like chemicals, but his scanner said it would not kill him right away. Food was harder. The emergency bars would last maybe 5 more days if he was careful. After that, he would have to eat whatever this world offered or starve. The plants were all poison. Jake learned that when he tried some red berries and spent 4 hours throwing up everything in his stomach. The small animals were too fast to catch and too smart to walk into simple traps. This world had been killing people for so long that everything here knew humans meant danger. On the 4th day, Jake saw his first Titan. He was climbing over some rocks looking for anything edible when the ground started shaking. Something huge was moving through the forest below him, making trees fall like grass. Jake found a crack in the rocks and squeezed inside just as the creature came into view. It was bigger than a house with armor plates covering its body like a tank. 6 legs thick as tree trunks carried it forward, and its head was full of teeth longer than Jake was tall. But the strangest thing was its eyes. They were not the dull eyes of a dumb animal. There was intelligence there. Intelligence in something that looked almost like sadness. The Titan stopped moving and turned its massive head toward Jake's hiding place. Those huge eyes looked right at him, and Jake was sure he was about to die. But the creature just stared for a long moment, then continued walking through the forest. It did not try to dig him out or call others to help hunt him. It just left him alone. Jake stayed hidden until dark, then crept back to his shelter. He had been on Tartarus 7 for 4 days and was still alive. That was probably some kind of record. But his food was almost gone and winter was coming. He could see ice forming on the mountains and feel the air getting colder each night. That night, Jake heard fighting in the distance. The howling sounds he had learned to fear were mixed with something else. Deep roars that shook the ground and made rocks fall from the cave ceiling. One of the titans was in battle with something, and it sounded like the big creature was losing. Jake knew he should stay hidden and mind his own business. Getting involved in whatever war was happening on this world would probably get him killed faster than starvation. But something about those intelligent eyes bothered him. The titan had seen him and chosen not to kill him. Maybe it was time to return the favor. Jake checked his pistol and the few medical supplies he had left. Then he stepped out into the night and started walking toward the sounds of battle. He was probably about to do the stupidest thing of his life, but he was tired of just waiting to die. Jake followed the sounds of battle through the dark forest with his pistol ready and his heart beating fast. The roars were getting weaker, but the howling sounds were getting louder and more excited. Whatever was attacking the titan was winning. He found them in a clearing where the trees had been knocked down like toys. The big titan was on its side, bleeding green blood from dozens of wounds. 6 smaller creatures circled around it, snapping their teeth and making those horrible howling sounds. They looked like wolves, but were the size of bears with metal spikes growing out of their backs. The titan tried to get back on its feet, but one of its legs was broken and bent at a wrong angle. Every time it moved, the pack animals jumped in to bite chunks out of its armor. They were taking their time and enjoying the kill. Jake could see the intelligence in the big creature's eyes turning to resignation. It knew it was going to die. Jake had 12 shots in his pistol and 6 targets. Not good odds, but he had been in worse situations during the war. He waited until all 6 pack animals were focused on their prey, then stepped into the clearing and started shooting. His first shot took the biggest wolf thing right through the head. It dropped without making a sound. The others spun around looking for the new threat, and Jake put 2 more shots into the closest one. The remaining 3 spread out and started circling him with their lips pulled back, showing rows of sharp teeth. Jake backed toward the wounded titan and tried to keep all 3 enemies in sight. These things were smart enough to coordinate their attacks. One would distract him while the others came from behind. He needed to break up their formation before they could use their numbers against him. When the first one charged, Jake rolled to his left and put a shot into its side. The creature yelped and stumbled but kept coming. Jake's next shot went wide, and he cursed himself for wasting ammunition. Only 6 shots left and 2 enemies still moving. The wounded animal limped toward him while its pack mate tried to get behind him. Jake was about to fire again when something huge moved beside him. The titan had managed to get its good front leg under itself and brought its massive head down like a hammer. The wounded pack animal disappeared under tons of bone and metal. The last enemy turned to run, but Jake put his final shots into its back legs. It fell hard and tried to crawl away, leaving a trail of dark blood. Jake walked over and finished it with his boot. He was not cruel, but he could not waste ammunition on something that might heal up and come back later. Jake turned to look at the titan and found those huge, intelligent eyes staring at him again. The big creature was still bleeding badly, and its broken leg was twisted at an angle that made Jake's stomach hurt just looking at it. Without medical help, it would die slowly and painfully. Jake had learned basic field medicine during his military training. He knew how to set bones and stop bleeding on humans, but this thing was totally different. Still, the principles should be the same. Stop the bleeding first, then worry about the broken bones. He used the metal sheets from his shelter to make splints and tied them in place with strips torn from his shirt. The titan held perfectly still while Jake worked and never tried to bite or crush him. It seemed to understand that he was trying to help even though they could not talk to each other. The hardest part was a broken leg. Jake had to use a piece of wreckage from his transport ship as a lever to pull the bones back into line. The titan made a sound like grinding metal, but never moved while Jake worked. By the time he was finished, both of them were covered in sweat and blood. Jake stepped back to look at his work and realized something strange was happening. His hands were tingling, and he felt more awake than he had since crashing on this world. The cuts on his arms from the sharp grass were healing faster than they should. Even his broken ribs felt better. The titan was changing too. Its wounds were closing, and the splints Jake had made were already too tight around the healing leg. Both of them were getting stronger, and Jake had no idea why. Over the next few weeks, Jake and the creature he started calling Rex became partners. Rex showed him which plants were safe to eat and where to find clean water. Jake used his military training to set up better defenses around their camp and plan hunting strategies. But the real surprise came when Jake discovered what Rex was guarding. Deep in the mountains was a hidden entrance that led down into the planet's core. Inside were machines and computers that still worked after thousands of years. This place was not just a prison world. It was a vault built by a race that no longer existed. The records Jake found in the ancient computers told a story that made his blood run cold. The Alliance had not discovered Tartarus 7 by accident. They had been looking for it. And Admiral Kane had known exactly what this place was when he sent Jake here to die. 2 years had passed since Jake Rivers was supposed to die on Tartarus 7. Instead, he was flying through space in a ship that should not exist toward a colony that was about to be destroyed. The ship had no name in any human language, but Jake called it Vengeance because that felt right. Rex was everywhere around him now. The creature had grown beyond anything Jake could have imagined when he first found it wounded in that forest clearing. Rex was a ship, and the ship was Rex. Living metal flowed like blood through corridors that breathed with each pulse of the massive heart hidden in the engine room. Jake sat in what might have been called a command chair, except it was grown from the same living metal as everything else. Tendrils connected to his arms and spine let him feel everything Rex felt: the cold of space, the pull of gravity from nearby planets, the electromagnetic signatures of other ships light years away. Haven's rest colony was sending out distress calls that sounded more desperate with each transmission. Raiders had surrounded the planet with enough firepower to turn the surface into glass. The Colonial Defense Force had 3 old patrol ships against a fleet of 20 pirate vessels. It was not even close to a fair fight. Jake had been listening to the pleas for help for 6 hours as Vengeance traveled through hyperspace toward the colony. Part of him wanted to ignore the whole situation and continue his hunt for the people who had destroyed his life. But he remembered being helpless while stronger enemies circled around him. He could not walk away from people who needed help. Rex shared his feelings through their connection. The creature had been designed by an ancient race to protect the innocent. That programming ran deeper than instinct. Rex wanted to fight the Raiders as much as Jake did. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's rest system and immediately saw the battle was already starting. The 3 colonial ships were running toward the planet, trying to stay ahead of the pirate fleet. Explosions lit up the darkness as missiles missed their targets and energy beams cut through space like deadly lightning. Jake felt Rex expanding around the ship as they accelerated toward the fight. Living armor flowed across the hull, while weapon systems that had no names in human language powered up with sounds like hungry animals growling. The ship changed from a simple transport into something that belonged in nightmares. The pirates never saw them coming. Jake and Rex had learned to move between dimensions during their time in the ancient underground facilities. Vengeance flickered in and out of normal space, like a ghost made of metal and rage. One moment there was nothing, and the next moment pirate ships were dying in balls of fire. Rex had grown weapons that could tear apart molecular bonds and turn solid metal into gas. The pirate fleet found themselves fighting something that could appear anywhere and strike from impossible angles. Their sensors could not track a target that existed in several dimensions at once. Jake picked his targets carefully. The pirates had families too, even if they chose to live by stealing and killing. He aimed for engine rooms and weapon systems instead of crew compartments when possible. But when the raiders turned their guns toward the planet's surface and threatened to kill civilians, Jake stopped being merciful. 3 pirate ships died in less than 10 seconds. Rex reached out with tendrils of living metal that phased through their hulls and tore apart everything inside. The remaining raiders decided that whatever they were fighting was not worth dying for and ran toward hyperspace as fast as their engines could carry them. The colonial defense ships hung in space, probably wondering what had just saved them. Jake opened a communication channel and spoke in a voice that sounded like his own, but carried harmonics from Rex's alien throat. Haven's rest colony, this is Commander Jake Rivers. The immediate threat has been neutralized. Are there any wounded who require medical assistance? The response came back filled with static and confusion. Commander Rivers, sir, we thought you were dead. The Alliance reported that you died in exile 2 years ago. How are you here, and what kind of ship are you flying? Jake looked around at the living walls that pulsed with light and felt Rex's amusement through their mental link. How could he explain that he had found something wonderful in a place designed to kill him? How could he tell them that the monster everyone feared had become his closest friend and greatest teacher? That is a long story, Jake replied. Right now you have bigger problems than my legal status. Word about this attack is going to reach Alliance headquarters within days. Admiral Kane is going to want to know who helped you and what kind of weapons they used. You might want to prepare some answers that do not include my name. The colonial captain's voice came back worried but grateful. Understood, sir. Is there anything we can do to repay you for saving our people? Jake thought about the question for a moment, then smiled in a way that would have frightened his old teachers at the academy. Just remember that the Alliance abandoned you when you needed help most. When the time comes to choose sides, you will know which one deserves your loyalty. Vengeance turned away from Haven's Rest and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving the colonists to wonder if they had been rescued by a hero or visited by something much more dangerous. Admiral Kane stood in the command center of New Haven Station, watching reports flood in from across human space. Ships were disappearing. Secret facilities that officially did not exist were being destroyed with surgical precision. Someone with impossible technology was hunting the Alliance's darkest secrets, and Kane knew exactly who it had to be. The same station where Jake Rivers had been tried and condemned 2 years ago was now surrounded by Rex's living metal hull. The creature had grown large enough to wrap around the entire structure, like a cage made of nightmares. Station weapons fired uselessly at armor that absorbed energy and healed faster than they could damage it. Jake walked through corridors that opened before him, without any effort on his part. Blast doors designed to stop armies parted like curtains when he approached. Security forces found their weapons would not fire, and their communication systems had stopped working. The station belonged to Rex now, and Rex answered only to Jake. In the council chambers where his fate had been decided, Jake found Admiral Kane waiting alone at the same desk, where 3 judges had once sat. The old man looked tired and smaller than Jake remembered. 2 years of carrying the Alliance's secrets had worn him down like water wearing a waystone. "Hello, Admiral," Jake said as he entered the room. "We need to talk." Kane looked up at his former student, and Jake could see fear in the old man's eyes. Not fear of death, but fear of the truth finally coming to light. "Jake, you should not have come back. Some secrets are too dangerous to reveal, even if you think you're doing the right thing." Jake sat down across from Kane and placed a data cube on the desk between them. The cube contained everything he had learned in the ancient archives on Tartarus 7, records of genocide and betrayal that went back centuries, proof that the Alliance had been built on lies from the very beginning. The architects were not extinct when humans first reached the stars, Jake said quietly. They were our allies. They shared their technology and helped us build the first colony ships. Then someone decided that sharing was not enough. Someone wanted everything for themselves. Kane's face went pale as Jake continued. The shadow faction that controls the Alliance has been systematically destroying every advanced species they encounter. They take their technology and then eliminate them completely. The architects created Tartarus 7 as a final safeguard when they realized what was happening, a place to hide their knowledge until someone worthy could find it. "Jake, you don't understand," Kane said desperately. "Humanity was weak when we first left Earth. We were surrounded by species that could have destroyed us without effort. The only way to survive was to become stronger than everyone else. Sometimes survival requires terrible choices." Jake shook his head, and Jake could feel Rex's presence in his mind, like a warm current of understanding and wisdom. Survival through domination is not strength, Admiral. It is fear wearing a mask. The architects taught me that real power comes from cooperation, not conquest. Kane stood up from his chair and walked to the window where he could see Rex's living hull pulsing with alien light. "What you have bonded with is not natural, Jake. You have let an alien intelligence change you into something that is no longer human. How can I trust anything you say when you are not even yourself anymore?" Jake laughed, and the sound carried harmonics that came from Rex's throat as well as his own. "I am more myself than I have ever been, Admiral. Rex did not change me into something alien. Rex showed me what humanity could become if we stopped being afraid of anything different from ourselves. Through his connection with Rex, Jake felt others responding to their call. Across human space, volunteers were stepping forward to bond with Rex's offspring, not to become weapons or slaves, but to become bridges between species. People who had been touched by the ancient technology and chosen to evolve beyond what they had been born as. The Corrupt Alliance ends today, Jake announced. Not through war or conquest, but through choice. People will decide for themselves whether they want to live in fear or grow into something better. Those who choose evolution will help build a new kind of civilization. Those who choose to stay as they are will be free to do so, but they will not be allowed to hurt others anymore. Kane sank back into his chair looking defeated. And what happens to people like me, Jake? People who made the wrong choices for what they thought were the right reasons. Jake stood up and walked toward the door, but stopped to look back at his old teacher one final time. That depends on whether you choose to learn from your mistakes or repeat them, Admiral. The galaxy is big enough for everyone if we stop trying to own it all. Rex began withdrawing from around the station as Jake made his way back to Vengeance. The living ship had planted seeds throughout the station's computer systems. Not viruses or weapons, but teachers. Programs that would help anyone who wanted to understand what the Alliance had really been doing all these years. As they jumped into hyperspace, Jake felt the minds of thousands of new partners joining their network. People who had chosen to bond with Rex's children and become part of something larger than themselves. The age of human supremacy was ending, and the age of cooperation was beginning. Jake Rivers had been sent to Tartarus 7 to die in obscurity. Instead, he had found a teacher who showed him that monsters were not defined by their appearance, but by their actions. He had returned not for revenge, but for redemption, and the galaxy would never be the same.